Today, we're looking at something that is probably sitting in your refrigerator right at this very second. But I promise you, by the end of this, you are never going to look at it the same way again. We are going on a totally wild, unbelievable ride through ancient trade routes, some seriously bizarre medical science, and clever marketing to uncover the strange history of ketchup. Okay, let's dive into this. When you picture ketchup, you instantly think of that bright red, sweet, tangy tomato sauce, right? It's basically the ultimate companion for a massive basket of fries. But what if I told you that for a huge chunk of its history, the whole concept of a tomato-based ketchup literally didn't exist? No way, right? To find the real roots of this famous condiment, we actually have to travel back thousands of years and halfway across the globe. And this brings us straight to ancient China. Dating way back to around 300 BCE, the earliest version of ketchup was called ketchup. And get this, it was not a tomato sauce at all. It was actually a fermented fish sauce. Chinese sailors and traders used this really pungent concoction to preserve their food on long ocean journeys and, to add a rich, savory flavor to their meals. So yeah, a far cry from the sugary red stuff we squirt on our burgers today. So how on earth did a Chinese fermented fish sauce start its journey to the modern American dinner table? Well, let's fast forward to the 17th century. European traders who were navigating the globe encountered this ketchup, absolutely loved the savory kick, and decided to bring the idea back home. But here's the thing, European palates and the local ingredients they actually had access to were entirely different, and that sparked a truly bizarre culinary transformation. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the sheer lack of anything even resembling a tomato. As Europeans adapted that Chinese fish sauce, they just started throwing in entirely new ingredients to capture that dark, savory flavor. Early European ketchup recipes relied heavily on things like mushrooms, walnuts, anchovies, and heavy spices. Seriously, if you asked for ketchup in an 18th century English tavern, you'd be handed a thin, dark, super salty liquid made from fermented walnuts. So why no tomatoes? Well, at the time, the tomato was facing a massive PR problem. When they were introduced to Europe from South America in the 16th century, Europeans were genuinely terrified of them. Many people actually believed tomatoes were a deadly poison. And to be fair, since the plant's leaves do contain toxic compounds, the fear was kind of real. But then we see this incredible flip. Because they weren't accepted as food, doctors eventually stepped in and started promoting tomatoes not just as safe, but as highly beneficial for your overall health. By the 1700s and early 1800s, ketchup wasn't just a fun sauce anymore. It was literally prescribed medicine. Doctors in England and America started recommending tomatoes to treat severe digestive issues. Got indigestion? Take some ketchup. Diarrhea? Ketchup. Liver problems or stomach pain? You guessed it, a healthy dose of tomato ketchup. The medical community became fully convinced that the tomato was the ultimate cure for pretty much whatever was ailing your stomach. And this medical craze found its absolute biggest cheerleader in an American doctor named John Cook Bennett. Dr. Bennett didn't just recommend tomatoes, he championed them as an absolute cure-all remedy. He aggressively promoted the idea that people should be consuming tomatoes in any way possible, raw, cooked, or, heavily concentrated into ketchup. But Bennett took it one step further. He actually went ahead and created and patented tomato pills. Listen to this incredible marketing slogan from the era. Tomato pills will cure all your ills. Step right up, ladies and gentlemen, and get the miracle cure. It was total carnival barker enthusiasm. But as with literally any major medical fad, the scammers rushed in. Fake medicine sellers started aggressively churning out knockoff pills and tonics. And the crazy part? Many of these copycat products contained little to absolutely no actual tomato in them at all. Of course, that couldn't last forever. Eventually, doctors actually studied these treatments and realized that, shockingly, ketchup was not a miracle medicine. It couldn't magically cure liver disease or fix your stomach pain. So as the medical community withdrew its support, this totally bizarre health craze just faded away by the mid-1800s. Ketchup was basically forced to pivot right back from the pharmacy shelf to the pantry shelf. So the crucial point is understanding this incredibly strange journey. We start way back around 300 BCE with a highly practical Chinese fermented fish sauce. Then we jump to the 17th century where Europeans turn it into this dark, spiced walnut sauce. And then, by the early 1800s, it has morphed into a literal medical miracle cure made out of tomatoes. It's an absolutely fascinating evolution, but, it still really doesn't look like the ketchup we know today. For that, we actually have to look at the man who rescued ketchup from the ashes of that whole medical craze and completely revolutionized it. Henry John Heinz. Heinz is the guy largely responsible for transforming ketchup into the modern, mass-market food we all recognize today. 1876. That is the magic number right there. This was the pivotal year the H.J. Heinz Company officially introduced their tomato ketchup commercially. And the way they did it was nothing short of brilliant, entirely changing the public's perception of processed food. Heinz knew he had an uphill battle. At this time, factory-made foods were poorly regulated. They were often unsafe, and frankly, they were pretty disgusting. So he built a totally foolproof strategy. He focused entirely on clean ingredients and safe food production so people knew his factories were pristine. Then, and this is a genius marketing move, he sold his ketchup in attractive, clear glass bottles. He wanted consumers to see exactly what they were buying to prove its purity. Throw in a guarantee of consistent flavor, and he successfully marketed his ketchup as pure, clean, and totally trustworthy. Heinz's strategy got a massive boost a few decades later with the passage of the 1906 Pure Food and Drug Act in the United States. This law dramatically increased public trust in factory-made foods by finally setting some safety standards. Because Heinz had already been championing clean ingredients in those clear glass bottles for years, his ketchup was perfectly positioned. The new legislation essentially supercharged the success of Heinz ketchup, completely validating his trustworthy image. And this brilliantly illustrates what happens when a perfectly manufactured product meets a massive cultural shift. Enter the 20th century and the absolute explosion of fast food culture. Ketchup finally found its ultimate purpose. It became the undisputed, strictly required companion for French fries, burgers, and hot dogs. The huge boom of the American diner cemented ketchup not just as a popular sauce, but as a genuine cultural icon. Fast forward to today, and tomato ketchup is found in the vast majority of American households. It is a certified staple, no question about it. However, the market is always evolving. While ketchup remains the absolute king of the fast food world, newer condiments, most notably salsa, have risen up as highly popular competitors, which really just reflects a modern shift towards spicier, much more complex flavors. Which leaves us with this final thought. We've seen ketchup evolve from an ancient Chinese fish sauce to a European walnut recipe, to a poisonous plant-turned miracle pill, and finally into a fast food staple in a clear glass bottle. It shows us that the food on our plates is never static. It is constantly evolving through trade, science, and brilliant marketing. So, I leave you with this to ponder. If ketchup can change this much over its wild history, what on earth will it look like and taste like in another 100 years? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep asking questions, and I'll catch you next time.